Welcome to our YouTube video series on employment law, focusing on employee terminations. My name is Christopher Neufeld of Neufeld Legal, and in this particular video we're going to be discussing whether it's the office staff or the field workers in oil and gas companies who get the proverbial shaft when it comes to termination and severance pay packages. And when we look at it, you're going to say, well, naturally, they're going to protect their own, which means that they're going to protect the office people, because that's the people they've been working with. And that's partly true. Typically, the office staff gets more appropriate what the law would suggest would be their appropriate termination and severance pay packages. But it's not only limited to the fact that the office people are the people who are coordinating amongst themselves and who are working with each other the most, and hence they get the better termination and severance pay packages. The fact of the matter is that the field workers, the guys who are operating out in the field, doing the hard, rigorous labor, are not only cut off from the office people, but their entire pay structure is such that allows for serious lapses with respect to how their termination and severance pay is being determined. And because of that, it's not only limited to the termination and severance pay, but it's also former back pay that is in jeopardy. So whereas office workers in oil and gas companies, these big giant petroleum corporations, typically get something that's somewhat closer to what they should be getting legally based on the common law, based on statute. What happens with the field workers is that from what we see from the outset is that the office staff, whether it's because they don't understand payroll, they don't understand the law properly, or they choose to ignore the demands of the law with respect to identifying what the full pay obligation is, and partly because they have this general feeling that the people working out in the field are not in a position and have not challenged them with respect to ensuring that their pay practices are correct and that they're field workers. They're not sophisticated professionals who work with the numbers all the time. Well, whatever the reason, they tend to be underpaid from a legal standpoint. And even though they might look at their paychecks and believe that they're getting paid significant amounts of money and are being fully paid what they're rightly due, that is not necessarily the reality. The reality is something starkly different. For due to the very complexity of pay in the field, and due to the fact that field workers almost never challenge their pay, and sometimes they might challenge their termination and severance pay, but those arrangements, when they're challenged, if they are corrected, they're subject to confidentiality agreements, settlement agreements, non-disclosure requirements. Those things are hidden away when they're corrected. And instead the company continues to operate their original practice of effectively not following the law and thereby not making full payments. And this is in part due to the fact that field workers are having a very complex pay arrangement, including significant amounts of overtime, including bonus arrangements, allowances, premiums, different types of benefits, different types of expectations, slightly different pays when they're doing different types of work. And this creates complexity. And what the companies tend to do, these big, giant, vast petroleum companies, is they're constantly trying to control costs. And one of their biggest costs is employee compensation. So what they do is they try to hope to keep these payments down. They try to undercalculate. They don't try to overcalculate or correctly calculate. And they keep on pushing this. So it's very possible that a field worker who's been working for the same company for 10 years, 15 years, in a company, a big giant petroleum company, then finds themselves terminated or fired from their job, and even if they quit, but that they could be owed significant amounts of money. Naturally, when you quit, and you gotta be careful with this, and this is why we talk about it in other videos, there's a lot of considerations. But when a field worker for a large petroleum company is terminated, is fired from their job, they could be due $50,000, possibly even $100,000 more than what they are being provided for in their termination and severance pay package. I know it's a shocking number, but if you've been working for the same company for 10, 15, even 20 years, and you're let go, and you work for a large petroleum company, especially one in Alberta, you could find yourself being significantly underpaid when you go out the door. And because of the complexity and because of the specificity of it, you have to go through all the paperwork. You have to go through all the calculations, ascertain what is legally required, as opposed to what they like to get you paid. Because the legal requirements and the correct calculations are going to be starkly different from what the large petroleum companies are going to be pushing out and initially advising their oil and gas field workers as to what they're due. And that is a reality you're faced with. So if you're a field worker as opposed to an office staff worker, you have the highest potential for being significantly underpaid and walking away, unless you challenge it, with far less than what you are owed, especially when you are terminated or fired from your job and you've worked a significant number of years for that particular petroleum company. So if that's the case, you need to move on it, you need to have it looked into, and make sure you're getting fully paid out. Because you've put in a lot of hard years, you've put a lot of toil in your body, far more than the office worker has. And the shocking thing is that you've put in so much time, you've sort of risked stuff, you sacrificed a lot, and you should be properly compensated. And what I find is far too many field workers in the oil and gas sectors allow themselves to walk away, get paid something, but not everything they're due. And if you're due more, you're entitled to pursue it. And you should pursue it because you've put in against some of the hardest years of your life. And if you're due money, you should collect on that money. And that's at least our position on it, especially where the law supports it. And it's both the common law and a statutory law, oftentimes, that supports these positions. So it's something that you should investigate, something you should work with the knowledgeable legal counsel on to ascertain. It's pretty quick to determine, if you got the right paperwork in front of you, as to whether or not you should be paid more than what they're offering you. And that is a critical thing when you get fired or terminated after serving a long period of time with a petroleum company, working as an oil and gas field worker. Thank you.